Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, sitting down to talk about an MMO that I slowly came to love over the years, and I've sat down to re-review after major expansions for the game and sinking dozens upon dozens upon dozens of hours into it, Star Wars: The Old Republic. Now, a bit of a Matty history lesson to those of you who are new here. The Old Republic is my favorite era of Star Wars, and there was a bit of a process there in accepting that my favorite era of Star Wars was held within an MMO, where I was very big on Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which is my favorite game of all time. So there was a period of time I really didn't like Star Wars: The Old Republic, but over time, I went through my acceptance phase, and I came to really enjoy it. Now, Star Wars: The Old Republic has been on a bit of an up and down ride, particularly down as of late, and I felt now is the perfect time to sit down and talk about Star Wars: The Old Republic, where the game lies, and if you should download it and give it a look here in 2022. I do offer the unique perspective of this, however. This is not an MMO that I grind. I don't grind any MMOs. I dabble in and out, and I play it primarily as a narrative-based video game. That's quite different from most MMO players who are looking for endgame content, they're repeating flashpoints, so on and so forth. That's not how I roll. I'm here for the stories, I love the dialogue, the storytelling, and that's what captures me the most. So I want to make sure that perspective is up front, here in your face, so you know what type of player you're engaging with for this type of review. If you're looking for something to really sink your teeth in long term, the stories will offer that, but when it comes to post-game stuff, I don't go all in on that. With that, if you're new here, you're into reviews, re-reviews, what have you, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Now, let's talk about Star Wars: The Old Republic as it stands here and now. So most recently was a brand new update, Legacy of the Sith, and this brought in a couple of changes to combat. Manon became a part of the game, but overall I want to talk about the core of the game, what most of you will be experiencing as potentially free players joining up and considering subscribing down the line. Just know that if you do subscribe, you get access to all the expansions in the game, which is a pretty good deal because that's dozens upon dozens of extra hours of content that you can get your hands on if you're really enjoying the base game, which all of that is free. So starting off with the core game, you have 8 origin stories that you can enjoy, full stories that are very long, by the way. And again, I need to emphasize free. I know that a lot of MMO and online games are free, but to me, what's always quite staggering about SWTOR, we'll abbreviate it now, is the level of production quality and fun choices that you can make and big gameplay moments and missions that are all available for free. It's a high quality game, quite honestly, but the fact that it continued to deliver that moment over moment over moment really impresses me that they're not just making this a game that's sub only. Unfortunately, this is because the game has lost popularity over the years. It has yet to really reinvent itself. It has yet to present a lot of new gameplay ideas, or at least for a while it had yet to. That's where Legacy of the Sith comes in, and I do want to talk about that a little bit more. So, Star Wars: The Old Republic plays like any hotkey MMO you've seen in the past. You have all of the multiple bars on the bottom of your screen. If you have enough abilities, they'll line up the side of your screen as well, and it'll be decorated with heads-up displays galore. However, what they introduced in Legacy of the Sith was combat styles. This was a really alluring feature prior to its launch, where taking a look at the Old Republic and how it stood, when you would pick a class in Origin Story, you'd be very much limited to the offerings of, say, a Sith Inquisitor. You'd pick them, you'd have one of 2 options to select from on how you wanted to approach your gameplay, and then you were pretty much locked in. What they proposed with combat styles originally sounded like you'd be able to effectively cross-contaminate and get abilities from other classes and let them seep into pre-existing classes to really make your own build. For me personally, that sounded really exciting for progression. Unfortunately, for a lot of players, combat styles under-delivered in overhauling the combat for SWTOR, because what it ended up being was you would select one combat style in the beginning of the game, and then you could select another. So it would allow you to roleplay a little bit where if you, say, got 5 light side points. You unlock that achievement. You could access like the Sentinel class as the Sith, so you'd have green lightsabers, and you could sort of play as kind of like a light side Sith character, like a kind of good guy who's struggling with the dark side of the Force. So it could let you get into the role playing a little bit more over there. However, what stinks about this is that you have to pick one or the other combat style. These can only be selected when you're not in combat, you're not in an instance. So what it means is you are either going to be playing as, say, the Inquisitor or the Marauder, just as a brief example there. And that was really upsetting for a lot of players, myself included, because it felt like a completely missed opportunity for the game to really grow and be a lot more fun to play, because you're going to build your character completely differently from every other character around you. Now, there still are builds and they are important, but just know that this combat overhaul didn't do as much for players as I think many of us expected, and it is a sub-only feature. Keep that in mind. If you are not a subscriber, you are not enjoying the perks of combat styles. Now, for a lot of people, it was one of those things where they're like, I'm not really missing much anyway, so they don't care, but something I want to make sure you're aware of. And that's the game that SWTOR plays, is they, I feel, do a good job of staying free without really intruding too much on your experience, but they do little things like this. No combat styles. Can't experience this slightly different gameplay system. Sprinting, running around. They will slow you down intentionally until you hit level 10 and unlock the ability to sprint. Otherwise, you're jogging all over the place to start the game. So they test your patience. May not be a big deal in your first story, but in your second, third, and fourth origin story, that can be a problem. Overall, though, I'm numb to it, so I don't really care. Now, I just want to make sure I confronted that first on the gameplay level. It is a simple hotkey MMO. Why do I play SWTOR, though? I'd like to answer that here. It is what I alluded to at the beginning of this video. It is absolutely 100,000% the storytelling here. You see, the reason SWTOR calls my name is it feels like me, as someone who loves single-player games. Particularly, I grew up on bioware RPGs with the likes of KOTOR, of course, Jade Empire, Mass Effect, Dragon Age Origins, just to name a few. I love that more intimate Western-style RPG that I feel like we're getting less and less and less as the years go on. But BioWare delivers some of the best when they're on their A game, and I still feel like SWTOR continues to deliver good stories. Now, don't get me wrong, I know there are moments that they've missed the mark, that they've upset players, like the way they handled Revan in this game was a bit questionable, so I completely understand that. As someone who's a diehard KOTOR fan, you're talking to the right person here. But I can sort of let those things slide to enjoy the overall narrative-focused experience here, because when I've played games like Final Fantasy XIV, which I plan to give a second chance soon, I think about how that game's very much geared towards raids, the big endgame bosses, and a lot of people do talk about its story, by the way. I don't want to knock that down, but it feels like, as someone who's close with another person who really loves this game and their group of friends, and hearing how they talk about it, it's always about the endgame content, the rinsing and repeating of loot, the occasional updates adding new enemies. And that's just not exclusive for Final Fantasy XIV. I'm not saying SWTOR doesn't do that, but for me, as a more, I'd say, casual MMO player that's not looking for something to get its hooks deep within me and pull me away for thousands of hours, as a single player gaming fan who does have other games that are 50 plus hours that I want to play, SWTOR is the perfect MMO for that kind of player. It's just not a necessarily large market, and the player count kind of speaks for itself. It's big enough where EA and BioWare are continuing to support it, but each and every single update continues to feel smaller and smaller. That is one of the bigger problems with the game. Just know, when you get into this, I think the days of really significant updates and overhauls are over, because what we saw with Legacy of the Sith was marketed as like the big to-do. This was the big overhaul. It was bringing in Manon. It's new stories. A lot of people were like, oh my God, it's been 10 years and we're still getting more stuff. And Manon was very brief. All of the combat style stuff under-delivered, even though they tested it in the public testing server. None of that really mattered. It still led to a complete under-delivery compared to what they've brought to us in the past. But again, if you're a new player coming in, I do think this stuff is less consequential to you because there's just so much to consume, whether it be the large areas, the tons of side quests, the amazing dialogue, the really fun choices where you can go full dark side and kill off tons of important characters. I love that this game gives you the ability to feel like you have true agency over your experience despite thousands of players running around you. That is what continues to call my name. It feels like a great single player story set in the Star Wars universe with some MMO elements. That particularly scratches an itch I have, which is, I want to get into an MMO, but I don't want to get into all the online-y stuff. I just want to be able to play a co-op game with my friends. You can do that. Party up with your friends, play through the story together, make choices together. You'll vote on choices and whatnot, and you can decide how you want to handle each story cooperatively. That type of stuff is awesome to me, and I think it's where SWTOR really does shine. I think it also shines in its music. Its music does have some callbacks to the original KOTOR 1 and 2, but it also has some brilliant original tracks that I absolutely love. Because my favorite thing about the Old Republic as a universe is that it's so lawless in certain instances, it's so heavily political in other parts, and so there's this, I'd say, brooding ambiance that occurs within KOTOR and SWTOR that's just consistent between both games. And overall, I can't think of another MMO where I go, oh yeah, I really like the atmosphere in this game. But you'll notice I'm using these types of keywords, atmosphere, narrative, for an MMO, and that's very different. Again, that's what speaks to me about this game and why I do like it. I also want to shout out Steam Deck. I did do some testing for Star Wars The Old Republic over on my Steam Deck. It's not my primary place to play it, but do know it is playable there. It is possible to play it there with the trackpads, and it's not the worst thing in the world. So to me, one of the things that I always wanted for Star Wars The Old Republic that'll never happen just due to the engine it was built on is the ability for them to take it and bring it to consoles, for example. I think this game just desperately needs a shot in the arm, and I don't think that'll come until they do probably a sequel, because again, with the way the engine is, they can't bring it to PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X. They can't do that. However, because it's a PC game, you can play it on Steam Deck, so it does get that new look, that new feel, playing a big MMO on the go. It's awesome. Is it ideal? No, there's a lot of pointing and clicking and hotkeys and remapping you will have to do. That makes it a bit of an exercise to get it truly working for you, but you can do it. And when you do, it is a pretty special moment, at least for someone like me who enjoys the occasional cozy game before bed. And like I said, there's a little atmosphere to SWTOR, and I like how cozy it can be at times, how brooding it could be at times. But if I just wanted to shout out a couple of stories, because you can pick what your origin story will be in the beginning of the game, what class you're going to do. I always tell people, start with the Imperial Agent. The Imperial Agent is fantastic. There are some real home runs in the game, and there are some misses in the game. I would say if you want to start off with a bang, with something that truly feels like, whoa, this is some intense Star Wars storytelling, Imperial Agent absolutely nails it for me. A lot of people also like the Commando class storyline because at the end, it gets particularly good. I can agree with that one as well. It's just early on, you're like, why do I really care? It's also very easy to get distracted from the main story, even when you are enjoying it, because there's just so much to do in the game. You can fly around in your ship and get into space fights, which is pretty awesome. There are missions that are more on rails that are in space fights that, not too crazy about, not too in love with, that just feel like busy work. There are companions that will travel with you and have their own storylines, and you can interact with them and learn more about them and make choices with them. So there's elements of the old and the new blending together here, and it does work really well. It's just you have to be aware that this is a pretty old feeling MMO. It is one that will soak up your time in narrative, not in repeatable gameplay objectives. It's one that does follow what I call the rule of 3 within MMOs, which I know, funny enough, in Star Wars is the rule of 2, but it follows the rule of 3 where it's like, get 3 of these or complete 3 of that. It loves that sort of rigid structure. It follows it to a T. So this is a great game to play with a friend if you want to remove perhaps a bit of the tedium and the rinse and repeat cycle from the gameplay, because again, it doesn't really do anything crazy new with it, and that's even post combat styles where I wasn't too in love with that change either. And I'd say I have some bias given that I love this universe so much, just Star Wars as a whole, let alone the Old Republic, that I'd make some exceptions. But even I couldn't, so I imagine many of you out there will be even harder on it. But I'm speaking to the new player coming in who doesn't know much about that stuff, and I always think that SWTOR is worth a download. It doesn't nickel and dime you any step of the way. You could put hundreds of hours into this game before you decide to sign up for a membership to experience the other expansions they have to offer, and at that point, it's not too much a month where, you know what, you've already put, in this case, let's say you finish all 8 stories, you've put probably 100 plus hours into the game. You could throw another $15 a month at it. It's also incredibly fair. I really need to shout this part out because I think it's very, very important. Let's say you are interested in those expansions. It's not keeping you at $15 a month until you beat them all so that you feel you need to stick with the game and rush with it. SWTOR charges you $15. If you cancel it, you're going to lose those perks, those abilities, like, for example, combat styles. You're not going to have access to that. But you get to keep your expansions and you get to keep the ability to go to level 70. I just think, personally, that's awesome that they do that. A one-time payment and you get all of that content, the ability to hit the cap with any character. That is fantastic to me. So it's not just a choice of, hey, this is really good storytelling in Star Wars, it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy its narrative focus overall, plus some solid gameplay that you've seen in other MMOs. It also feels very fair, like it's not constantly nickel and diming me. And that doesn't get into other parts of the game that are repeatable that you may find enjoyment in, like flashpoints. I do think that flashpoints are very fun in this game. It's just that sometimes, as you will with any game that has loot in it, you might rerun the same mission over and over. I know more people like that type of stuff versus me, where I'm just like, no, I played many games like this. I got my fix with like Borderlands 1 and 2. So to me, repeatable missions with loot, it doesn't scratch a particular itch anymore for me. But all in all, SWTOR in 2022, there's a lot of negative talk about it throughout the community. I think the hardcore community right now is displeased with it. That is completely fair because I think they feel a bit abandoned, that there could be more if they injected more life into this game with money because it is a profitable game. I 100% agree with them on that. If you're a long-term fan, yeah, your frustration is justified. But if you're a new fan coming in, you don't know much about the ups and downs of things, you're kind of stepping into it blind, it is worth a shot. And if you're returning, like I've returned on multiple occasions, I still find a lot of enjoyment in it. There's still a lot of great stories to be seen. And again, I just love the Star Wars universe, and I feel this is one of the best ways to interact with it. So yeah, SWTOR still gets a thumbs up from me. It's a game that I hated at first because it wasn't a single player Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic game. I came to know it for what it was, not what I wanted it to be. And yeah, it's had some changes over the years. It's still a bit flawed, but I gotta say that what it is now as a narrative-based MMO, I appreciate it because there's nothing really quite like it that at least I've experienced on the market. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I leave it in your hands. Do you like Star Wars The Old Republic as well? If so, sound off down below. If you don't, I'm also curious to hear your thoughts. Other than that, I'll catch all of you in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.